All right. Let's get this thing going. What's good, Knicks Nation? Salute. It's your boy Alex Terrace, aka the Stratocaster, back again with another game of the week preview. We are previewing the New York Knicks facing the Phoenix Suns tomorrow night. Tomorrow night being Friday at 10 p.m. You can catch the game on ESPN if it's not on MSG. And who better to help me break down this game is Gerald Bourguet. He covers the Phoenix Suns for the Phoenix Network. He's the lead writer. You can go find him on the Phoenix podcast, talk about the Suns. He does great work over there, so make sure to go check out his work. But before we get into asking how Gerald's doing, talk about this game, make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to a $100 match. All right, let's get into this. Gerald, how are you feeling today, my man? How's it going?
Doing great. I'm reeling from the back-to-back. We just had the Twins back in town, so it was a pretty full slate this week, but doing great. We got the big three back last night for the first time, so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you finally have a fully healthy, so I guess I could say fully healthy when I mean that by the big three. I think you have Grayson Allen, who's going to be missing time, so it's interesting. No one has seen what this team looks like at full strength. I'm still waiting to see what it is. I have some questions about this team, but I'm glad that you're here to help me break down all these storylines. So let's get right into it. How do you feel about the Suns so far this season? I mean, you already talked about first time you had the big three play together yesterday, but the line has just been kind of all over the place to start with, but yet they're doing well. What's been your take on the Suns so far?
Yeah, it's been interesting because, you look at their record, they're 13 and 11. They're, a top 10 offense with a bottom half of the league defense. I think they're 17th in defensive rating. It's just been one of those seasons where it's been hard to kind of cobble together any sort of cohesion because of the guys they've had in and out of the lineups. Bradley Beal, I think last night was his fifth game of the season. He's already ineligible for end of season awards because he's not going to meet that 65 game minimum. You have Devin Booker in and out of the lineup with, I think, 4 or 5 different kind of small nagging injuries. And then Kevin Durant goes down here and there. Like, they just haven't been able to have the same lineups on the floor for a given week, let alone the season. So we're only 24 games in. They still have time to build that continuity, but a lot of the fan base out here is pretty concerned about just the injury thing because, coming into this, we heard a lot, the Suns are the Brooklyn Nets 2.0. And as much as I like the basketball fit of this big three better than that Nets team, the injuries have been a very similar story to what we saw in Brooklyn, even though it went beyond injuries with some of those absences they had there. So it's hard to evaluate this team. I think you've seen a lot of role players have to do more than they normally would and struggle with that. But the firepower of this big three, and especially Kevin Durant and Devin Booker when they're actually on the court, is still pretty undeniable.
Yeah, especially with D-Book and KD, this team has still been, hey, look, they've still been doing work. They're 13 and 11 in a tough Western Conference. You want all three to be healthy, and I understand that. I mean, the West is just, I mean, the fact that the Suns are 13 and 11 and they're ranked 10th right now, that's insane. That should tell you about how talented the Western Conference is. But now with Bradley Beal back and what you saw last night, how do you feel about the fit and what did you make from their return?
Yeah, I think the big three shared the court together for about 19 of the 48 minutes last night, and they were a plus 12 in those minutes. So, when those three are on the court, it's very potent. The struggle is going to be figuring out how you stagger those guys. And they had one of them on the court, at least one at all times last night. But it was the first time kind of being able to work with that stagger. And the struggle is going to be cobbling together those lineups when Devin Booker's not on the court. The Suns have really struggled in the non-Booker minutes this season. I think they're like a minus 73 when he sits and a plus 100 and something when he's played. And it was the same story last night, which is kind of the whole point of having a big three, so you don't have to worry about that. They were a plus 16 in his 40 minutes, and in the 8 minutes he sat, they were outscored by 20. So it's one of those things where Beal is still kind of coming off a minutes restriction. He's only played 2 games since he missed an entire month with the back injury. So they're not playing him his full minutes yet. And they also were missing Grayson Allen. They were missing Eric Gordon. They were missing Josh Okogie. So it's one of those things where, of course, the night where the big three plays, they don't have a lot of their bench guys that, you want to be trying to put together these lineups with. You need all of that bench depth if you're going to stagger guys like that. So that was a little bit of a struggle, but I did like a lot of what I saw, Booker being doubled and getting off the ball quickly, having Kevin Durant one pass away and Bradley Beal two passes away is a real luxury. There was one play where the Nets doubled him. He swung it across the court to KD. They found Beal in the corner and he attacked his closeout, was able to get an easy pull-up jumper. Those are the types of situations that Beal is going to be able to feast on all season long.
Absolutely. Speaking about the role players that you have added to this team, like Eric Gordon, Grayson Allen, because it was after the trade for Bradley Beal that you really got a lot of those guys, and as well as the DeAndre Ayton trade. And when we spoke on the NBA report, I'm pretty sure Ayton was still on the team too. So I want to get your thoughts on this. What did you make of the Ayton deal to get all these role players? And do you think the role players that you added, are they enough to support this big three cast to make a deep playoff run?
Yeah, I think if you look at the trade itself, obviously DA is the most talented player in that group, but I think the Suns liked the fit of Yusuf Nurkic better for this team. And the biggest reason why is if you look at that big three, and especially when they haven't been healthy, the junk defenses that opponents have thrown at them, doubling a lot, half court traps, box and ones, triangle and twos, like all kinds of things that you don't typically see on a night to night basis. You need a big who is able to do something with the ball when he catches it in the short pocket, because guys are going to blitz out of that double team. The ball handler is going to feed it to that big man. And in the past, DeAndre Ayton is a guy who would kind of short circuit in those situations. He would just pull up for a mid-range jumper. He wouldn't attack the basket. He wouldn't be capable of swinging it to the second side and attacking those 4-on-3 advantages. And Nurkic is a very gifted passer. For what he lacks as a defender and foot speed, he's a really good passer who can move the ball. And you can get him the ball at the elbows and let Beal or Booker or all these different guys cut every which way around him, and he's going to be able to deliver that ball. So they like the toughness, the physicality, his ability to get to the free throw line. And when you add in Grayson Allen, who's been a top 5 3-point shooter this season when he's been out there, like those rotational pieces are huge. Even if Nasir Little doesn't give you anything, and last night he was one of their best bench players coming off the concussion protocol. So it's one of those things where, again, you need everybody to be healthy so you can see what your actual playoff rotation is going to look like. But for the time being, with those three contributing, I think they're pretty happy with the change of scenery. And I think it was good for DeAndre Ayton as well.
Once again, we're talking to Gerald Bourguet. He covers the Phoenix Suns for Phoenix Sports. He's the lead writer of the Phoenix Suns for Phoenix Sports. And you can also catch him as a co-host for Phoenix Suns podcast. All right, Gerald, you mentioned Yusuf Nurkic and his role on this team and how, KD, Booker, and Beal are able to cut, and he's able to find those guys being a solid passer. I got to take you off a little of the beaten path to just talk about the Phoenix Suns, because there was an incident that happened not too long ago, and I want to know your thoughts and opinion on the whole Draymond incident. What did you think about Draymond knocking Yusuf Nurkic out? I need to know someone who covers the team, if you thought it was malicious, if you thought it was an accident, because that's what Draymond's saying. It's essentially he was trying to sell a foul, but I don't buy that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm buying it either, to be honest. He said after the game he didn't mean to hit him and he was just trying to sell a foul call. But even if that is the case, how are you going to swing your arms like that to try to sell a foul call? Like, we need to rethink the whole structure of how players are lobbying for these calls if that's what it takes to get one. I don't know if he meant to connect on his face quite like that, but it's still a dangerous play. And given his track record, it's hard to take his word for it in this situation. There have been so many incidents with the groin kicks and, stomping on Sabonis's chest just last year. Like it's hard to take him seriously, putting people in headlocks. Like, we talked to Kevin Durant after the game or after last night's game. And, he was saying that he doesn't think that that's who Draymond is, but it's been incident after incident. So he's hoping that he's able to get the help he needs and kind of put this behind him, whatever that looks like. I know Yusuf Nurkic had that viral quote about that brother needs help, but it kind of feels like he does at this point. And it's not just because the Warriors are having a rough season. I think he's always had that kind of fire as a competitor, and sometimes it bleeds over in very unhealthy ways. And we're seeing more of it this season, I think, because the Warriors are struggling.
Yeah, I agree. And like when you watch Draymond, like as you talked about, or as you mentioned it, there's been many incidents, right? You talk about Sabonis last year, you talk about this year, we have Rudy Gobert. Yeah, he has him like in a stranglehold essentially, and then you have now this. I don't care if it's open fist or open hand or a closed fist, whatever. Like, I don't know what you're doing to try to sell someone grabbing you at the hip. That just doesn't make any sense, especially since it looked like it was Draymond's right hip, and then you use your left arm to go knock him out. That just makes, I don't know how that action works, but he's suspended indefinitely as the NBA has announced. And then it's on for the Warriors to figure out how they're going to help him, and that's essentially what Woj reported yesterday, that the Warriors with Dunleavy are trying to figure out how you help Draymond Green and make sure that he's ready to play basketball again. So it's interesting, but yeah, I heard Kevin Durant's comments last night, and considering that you play with him, I thought it'd be right to just ask you, since you cover the Phoenix Suns, and it was right there. It's just such a mind-boggling thing. Have you seen Nurkic's play like drop a little bit because of that, or is he fine and he's still playing at a regular level?
Not really, honestly. He stayed in the game after the incident in the Warriors game, and then this last game that they had, he had a massive double-double. I think he had about 20 rebounds or so. So it was one of his better games of the season. I think he's a guy that responds well to certain matchups, and in this case, a little bit of adversity for sure.
Okay, okay. It'll be interesting, man, to see what happens, and we're gonna get into the matchup soon. But I got two more questions for you. What are your thoughts on Vogel, man, as a head coach? I mean, we talked about on the NBA report this offseason, but now that you get to see, some of the work that he's put into this team, having to manage a lineup that isn't fully healthy and different rotations, essentially what seems like on a nightly basis. What have you thought about the job he's done so far?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask. Because if you ask me, I think he's done a decent job.
Hmm.
There's only so much you can do when you don't have your three best players available. This roster did a really nice job on the margins of getting guys on, veteran minimums, that type of thing, rounding out the rotation. But at the end of the day, they are veteran minimum guys for the most part. So if you don't have your three best players available, you're going to struggle. It's going to be a lot harder. And I think he's done a pretty good job of, relying on his star power for the offensive end, trying to get other players involved. And then defensively, that's where the Suns need their most improvement. That's been the disappointment out here, is obviously he's a defensive minded coach. He's been a guy who's had, I think in his career, like 6 or 7 top 5 defenses. Suns right now are 17th. But the one thing I will say that I think is lost on a lot of people is, as much as you need your full complement of guys to build chemistry on the offensive end, I would argue you need it just as much on the defensive end. People kept saying, oh, well, when the big three's healthy, that's not going to suddenly save the Suns defense. And I agree to a certain extent, but you need to have guys in their set pecking order in the rotation. Let them build some continuity with these guys by playing with the same group of guys on a night in, night out basis. The Suns haven't had that with their starting lineup. They haven't had that with their bench guys. They've had Grayson Allen and Eric Gordon starting for most of the season, and fully healthy, those might be 2 6-man of the year candidates instead. So it's one of those things where it's really hard to evaluate the job that Vogel has done, just because we haven't seen him been able to field a 5-man lineup for like a week straight to see what the defensive end looks like. He'll say that there's a lot of defensive principles that they need to be better on. He's not going to make excuses about who's been in and out. And I do think the Suns should be better than where they are, 17th in defensive rating. They're going to have to be if you want to win a title, and then, keep up with playoff offenses. But I think to this point, it's hard to judge him too harshly until we see what the full product looks like.
For sure. And I just want to know, because you said you think he's done a good job, you think Vogel's done a good job. What are the complaints against him, really, that others have been saying?
Yeah, it's mostly the defensive thing. There's, just bringing up, he's a defensive coach. Why aren't we a top 10 defense? All this stuff like that. And it's like, well, because they don't have any cohesion out there right now. They don't have any guys or lineups that they can look to and be like, oh, yeah, that has worked in a significant sample size. So it's one of those things where it is going to take some time. There does need to be an element of patience. And for a fan base that's been waiting 55 years for a championship, patience is not exactly our strong suit out here. But yeah, I think that's the biggest complaint against Vogel, and some of the offense gets a little ISO heavy down the stretch, but I think that's more a product of, the Suns' big three and their abilities in those scenarios more so than what is and isn't being run out there.
Look, man, we're Knicks Nation over here is struggling too. Okay, we haven't seen a championship in over 50 years. We have two that I was even born for. That was more my dad's time. I'm still waiting to see, them. I'm still waiting for the Knicks to go down to through the Canyon of Heroes around here. But it is, look, man, it's tough. I get it. I get the Suns. I get the Suns fans. Angst and wanting to see a championship, especially when you have a big three, which is Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. I'm interested to see how they perform. I just wish it wasn't against the New York Knicks, which it always seems like it's against the Knicks when teams want to make their debut. It's like, oh, this guy's injured. Oh, wait, we got KP back for the Celtics. He's back after missing the in-season tournament to go against the Knicks. The consolation prize for not beating the Bucks, and now we get the consolation prize of now losing to the Utah Jazz last night to face the Phoenix Suns with their healthy big three. But I digress. Do you expect the Suns to make another move by the trade deadline to improve their defense, to add to the offense? What do you expect out of them by the trade deadline?
Yeah, I think a move on the margins might be in the books. I know, you look at what Matt Ishbia has done his first day on the job. He went out and got Kevin Durant. His first offseason, he went out and got Bradley Beal. They were aggressive in free agency. They traded DeAndre Ayton. Like, this guy's whole MO is we're going to put all of our chips to the center of the table now because we realize that we have, a 2 to 3 year window with this current group. And then beyond that, as long as Devin Booker is still our guy, we can restructure around him after the KD and Beal contracts come off the books. So that part's going to be a challenge. But for now, I think their biggest needs are possibly a backup point guard, like a true floor general, because it's hard to say again because Beal and Booker have only played 2 games together so far this year, and Beal's supposed to be their other kind of primary ball handler. So for a lot of the year, it's just been Book, and when Book hasn't been out there, it's been guys like Grayson Allen, Eric Gordon, and Jordan Goodwin who have been controlling the rock. And as much as those guys helped, they are not primary guys. They're guys that you want to be as secondary creators. So it's hard to evaluate right now. But I do think they could use a guy who can just set up the offense, who can take care of the ball and minimize turnovers when Booker is out, when Beal is out. I know that they were interested in TJ McConnell over the summer and leading up to the season. So that might be a name to keep on heading to the trade deadline. And I also think they might need a third center because right now they've got Nurkic, who has been a plus when he's been on the court. He's done as well as you could expect in terms of the rim protection. He's still vulnerable to getting beat off the dribble just because of the foot speed. Drew Eubanks has either been really good when he's checked in or an unmitigated disaster. So behind him, it's Bol or small ball with Chimezie Metu at the 5. I don't think either of those guys are the option that you want if you're looking for a rim protecting, shot blocking, more athletic kind of big. That's the archetype that I think they're missing right now. And ironically enough, they had one last year with Bismack Biyombo, and now he's playing elsewhere. So it's one of those things where I think a backup point guard and maybe a third center would be areas to look into, and possibly even just a bigger, stronger 4 to allow Kevin Durant to play at the 3. When they've trotted out those 3 guard lineups, they're a little bit undersized. They get beat up on the glass. So maybe having a little more size in your starting lineup is something you would target. But again, the Suns have very limited means to pull off trades right now.
Salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all of you for tuning in for Game of the Week preview. We were previewing the New York Knicks facing the Phoenix Suns, and joining us today is Gerald Bourguet. He's the lead Suns writer for Phoenix Sports Network. You can also catch him as a co-host for the Phoenix Suns podcast. And guys, this show is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. So make sure to use that promo code KFTV to get up to a $100 match. Look, everyone, I love this app. It's a lot of fun. It makes the game a little bit more interesting when you're watching, and especially if you're watching the Knicks last night and you want to have some other interest outside of just watching our offense collapse down the stretch of the game. What better way than to download the app Underdog Fantasy? And the cool thing about this is that you can create your lineups up to 5 players and choose different scoring categories or such like that, whether it be points, rebounds, stuff of that nature. All you got to do is just choose higher and lower what you think the player will do. So for today, here are my selections for what we're going to see for tonight's games. So number one, I took Nikola Jokic to score higher than 50.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Took him because they're facing the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets, even though they have Nick Claxton playing at center, I believe that he can get the work done. Obviously, we're talking about a league MVP caliber candidate right here. I don't think Nick Claxton's strong enough to stop Jokic. And look, they're going to need Jokic just facilitating. He's going to have strong rebounding. I think he's going to overpower Claxton and be able to reach those numbers. The next guy that I chose is Kevin Huerter. The Sacramento Kings are facing the Thunder tonight. I chose higher than 2 3-pointers made. We know that Huerter is a sniper from downtown. I believe that he can hit more than 2 3-pointers tonight against an OKC team. Even though they got solid defense, the way you got to defend De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, it should open up Huerter enough to get off some 3-pointers. Then I chose Klay Thompson, lower than 16.5 points. The Golden State Warriors are facing the Clippers. Clippers are rolling right now. Klay is on the downtrend. You know, we have all the news about him not getting the contract extension. We've seen him struggle a few nights ago. I don't think he's going to reach 16.5 points. I took the lower on that side. I got Jason Tatum now. Boston playing the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cavs looking a little shaky this year. Taking Tatum for more or higher, I should say, than 28 points. He's been averaging close to 30. I think that's going to be an easy night for Tatum just because he's playing. He's also playing as an MVP caliber player this season again. And then last and certainly not least, I took Domantas Sabonis for higher than 7 assists. Look, guys, he's like Jokic White. I see this meme floating around here where you see like the Pokemon evolution of passing big men. All right. You have the lesser version, which is Alperen Sengun. He's still young. So he's like the Charmander. You have Domantas Sabonis being like the Charmeleon, and then you got the Charizard being none other than Nikola Jokic himself. So I'm going to go with the Charmeleon of Domantas Sabonis tonight to get more or higher, I should say, than 7 assists. So make sure to download the app Underdog Fantasy. Enjoy the fun. Make sure you use the promo code KFTV to get up to a $100 match. Make sure to do it, man. Support our sponsors. All right, Gerald, let's get back into this. Let's talk about the matchup now. Let's get down to the X's and O's. Let's get to the nitty and gritty of this matchup. We have, as you noted, Phoenix Suns team that just got his big 3 back. They're trying to bounce back after losing to the Brooklyn Nets. And what better way to take on the New York Knicks after a lowly night against the Utah Jazz? But I don't think it's going to be easy. I do not think it's going to be easy. Even though the Knicks are missing Mitchell Robinson, we got Isaiah Hartenstein, who's a solid backup big. Jericho Sims showing that he's still, Mitchell Robinson light, where he can guard the perimeter as well with his quick lateral movement. I don't think it's going to be an easy matchup. And there's some categories I think the Knicks can really expose the Phoenix Suns, especially if they're playing at a high level. One is the Suns ranked 20th in according to Clean the Glass. The Suns ranked 20th in shots at the rim frequency and 21st when defending the rim accuracy. You talked about how the Suns need a more versatile big that could be a rim protector. I think with that as their weakness, a team like the Knicks, when you have Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, and Jalen Brunson, all those guys who like to get downhill, I think that's one area where the Knicks can thrive. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think we saw it in the last matchup as well. Brunson had a phenomenal game, and then Randle really came alive, I think, in that third quarter, and really created problems for the Suns. They don't have that type of physical defender who also has the speed to stay with Randle, because if you put Nurkic on him, he's got the speed advantage. If you put anybody else on him, he's got the size and strength advantage there. So it's a tough individual matchup there against Randle, and Brunson has been a guy who's given the Suns problems for years, obviously going back to that series against the Mavericks a couple seasons ago. So they struggle with shifty downhill guards, and especially if Josh Okogie is not out there to try and check Brunson a little bit, it's going to pretty much fall on Jordan Goodwin coming off the bench and being able to do the same thing. The last time they played, it came down to a last second shot that Book made. So it was a close competitive game for the most part. And I wouldn't be surprised if it is again on Friday, because as much as the Suns have their big 3 back, like I said, they're still figuring things out. We don't know if Grayson's going to be available, if Eric's going to be available. So it's one of those things where the bench might be a little bit gutted, and you see them struggle in those minutes when they're trying to stagger those three guys.
Yeah, and you know, in that last matchup between the Knicks and the Suns, you didn't have Kevin Durant either or Bradley Beal. So, for a Knicks perspective, it came down to a last second shot by Devin Booker, and he did what Devin Booker does. He just drained a miraculous three in order to defeat the Knicks. But it's gonna be different because you do have Kevin Durant. That's another lethal scorer out there. You do have Bradley Beal, who did you think did Beal look a little rusty coming back? So like, if he does
It's
look rusty,
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think he's looked good in spurts. I think for him, the challenge is playing on that minutes restriction. His stints when he's on the court are a little bit shorter than they'd normally be. And so it's felt like, in the first quarter when he's starting to catch a rhythm, that's when he comes out and then has to sit for, 6, 7 minutes before going back in. It's hard to kind of build that momentum when it's stop, start, that kind of thing. So I think that's been his biggest struggle. He has been one of the guys that they've missed this season because, to your point about frequency of shots at the rim, Beal gets a lot of shots at the rim. He drives a lot. He cuts a lot. He's a very much guy that you have to worry about off the ball because he's constantly moving. So I think with him back, we've already seen him curl around some picks and get downhill. And I think we'll see it more as he gets more comfortable with where his body's at and he gets, kind of shakes that rust off. For now, it's been a lot of mid-range stuff, but once he starts attacking the basket, I think that's one area where he'll definitely help the Suns with the amount of shots that they're getting at the rim. Maybe we'll see that against the Knicks, but it's one of those things where he just kind of has to figure out his timing in terms of, okay, I need to heat up now because I'm going to come out a few minutes into my stint here.
yeah, and I would expect him to get a lot of run with the second unit for the Suns, just to get into that type of rhythm. But we'll see. I mean, the one thing that really concerns me for the Knicks is that without Mitchell Robinson, and having Grimes now move from a starting player to the bench, our perimeter defense has taken a step back. Our rim protection has taken a step back as well. And the biggest thing for me, though, even though the defense as a whole has taken a step back, the Knicks 3-point shooting defense has been woeful. And look, the Knicks are 27th when it comes to frequency of 3-pointers that are attempted against them throughout the league, according to Clean the Glass. And they're 17th when it comes to actual makes. And the Phoenix Suns, when it comes to accuracy, they're 5th according to Clean the Glass. So that's the biggest concern for me, is that we're not stopping the three. And when you have guys like Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant out there, 3-point shooting is their specialty. And that's going to be a big concern for me. I wonder if Tibbs will allow I like, this is where I'm curious to see where Grimes gets into this, because he's one of our better perimeter defenders along with Emmanuel quickly. Like, how will Tibbs tackle that issue? Because if you just allow Kevin Durant or Devin Booker to get into a rhythm from the perimeter, it's going to be a long night.
Yeah, that's a tough assignment, and it's a game where you would hope that Tibbs kind of goes with some of the defensive minded guys, just because if you don't have defensive minded guys out there, you're going to have to throw a lot of double teams, and that automatically puts your defense in rotation. Booker has improved a lot in terms of getting off the ball and manipulating defenses when he feels the blitz coming. And he's done that without his, two main co-stars out there for most of the season. So now that they're out there, having Kevin Durant one pass away, Beal one pass away, that's kind of unfair. So I'm interested to see what kinds of defenses he throws at Booker and Kevin Durant, because he's another guy that's capable of drawing double teams when he catches it on that extended post up. So that's going to be a good question. I think the Suns haven't attempted as many 3-pointers as a lot of people out here would like, especially, like you said, with their efficiency on those shots. But it'll be interesting to see if the Suns can make them pay, because, if they're missing Grayson Allen, who's been a top 5 3-point shooter this year, if they're missing Eric Gordon, who, as we all know, is not afraid to let it fly from about 30 feet out, like, they're missing 2 of their best floor spacers in terms of the other guys. So it's going to be interesting to see, like, is a Jordan Goodwin, is a Chemezi Metu going to be able to knock down the open looks they're getting. Same with Nas Little. Same with Yuta Watanabe. Honestly, he's been kind of disappointing in that regard. Missing a lot of wide open threes this year, the same types he was making all season with Brooklyn. So it's one of those situations where I think if the Suns are missing Grayson and Eric still, maybe that Knicks number doesn't look so bad in terms of the number of threes they're giving up there.
We'll see. We'll see. Another area where the Knicks can thrive in this game, even though the 3-point defense has been abysmal, I think one area defensively is points off of turnovers. The Knicks are 10th in the league right now when it comes to points over turnovers, points off of turnovers, and the Phoenix Suns are 27th in the league. I think for the Knicks, this is a team that has now improved, especially when you add guys like Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo. You have Quentin Grimes, who likes to get out and run, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly. Isaiah Hartenstein's a solid big who moves in transition as well as Jericho Sims. I think this is an area where the Knicks can thrive, especially if their defense is locked in, is forcing the turnover, getting out and running in transition, and scoring against the Phoenix Suns team. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that has been an area of emphasis for the Suns this season because, especially when Booker hasn't been out there, turnovers have been a major problem because, like we've been talking about, they don't have that true point guard. As much as they wanted to play faster this year and enable Booker with the ball in his hands, they do miss Chris Paul in that regard because he was a meticulous game manager, a guy who was a very low turnover guy, set everything up for them. So we've seen a couple of games from the Suns this season where they've had really high turnover games that have led to a ton of opponent points off turnovers. So that's an area that the Knicks are really efficient in. It could be a problem for the Suns. They have gotten better since Booker's been back in taking care of the ball. He's had a couple of high turnover games, but for the most part, he's been pretty good about taking care of the ball. So it'll be interesting to see how they manage that in their second game with the big three. But the Suns are a weird team because they'll take care of the ball for 90% of the game, and then they'll commit 2 or 3 just mind-numbingly bad turnovers that you're like, where was he even looking on that pass? So don't be surprised if you see a couple of those tomorrow.
Okay. And the one matchup I do think will be even is points in the paint between both these teams. Both of them, shockingly, the Knicks, and especially without Mitchell Robinson now, I don't expect this to be any greater, which is the Knicks are 24th right now when it comes to points in the paint, as the Phoenix Suns are 22nd. It'll be interesting considering that both teams don't really have that rim protection. I look at Phoenix's defense and they're ranked. I think they're definitely in the bottom 10 when it comes to protecting the rim, when it comes to frequency and accuracy. And for the Knicks, especially without Mitchell Robinson, as I noted, and it's still early to see like the true numbers and see where this team really sits when it comes to protecting the rim now without Mitch. But I think that will be an area where both teams can thrive. What do you think?
I think so. I think it's something where, especially now that Beal's back, especially now that there's more driving lanes for Devin Booker with the spacing that he has around him, kind of the gravity that those two bring, there's going to be more opportunities to attack, especially a defense that doesn't have, their best rim protector in Mitchell Robinson. And I think for the Knicks, the Suns have kind of struggled with keeping opponents out of the paint. We saw last night the Brooklyn Nets get a lot of penetration and kickouts for threes. So their perimeter defense isn't as strong when you're missing a guy like Okogie, when you're playing the big three for the first time and they're trying to build that defensive continuity together. So I think both of these teams are going to have opportunities to drive, to get into the paint, and to finish, just because, as much as Nurkic has done his best in that regard as a rim protector, he still has his limitations in that regard. Nobody's going to back down from challenging him at the basket.
Absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Gerald Bourguet. He is the lead Phoenix Suns writer over at Phoenix Sports, and you can also catch him as the co-host on Phoenix Suns podcast. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys, guys. Make sure to hit the thumbs up button for your boys. Support the channel, share the links, share the videos. All right. Gerald, let's get into the key matchup of the game. For me, it is Julius Randle versus Kevin Durant. These two guys Julius has just been on a tear right now. Julius in the last 10 games is averaging 26.3 points. He's averaging close to 10 rebounds, 5 assists. He's shooting 55% from the field, shooting 35% from downtown, and he's shooting about 80% from the free throw line. And as we know who Kevin Durant is. It's no shocker who he is. He's averaging 31 points. He's averaging close to 6 rebounds, close to 7 assists, which has been really impressive to me. He's shooting 54% from the field, 52% from downtown, and over 90%. This is over the last 10 games, everybody. But Kevin Durant has just been on one right now to help this Phoenix Suns team stay in the mix in the Western Conference. This is going to be a battle, man, because the way Julius has just transformed his playing style yet again is really impressive. Last year, he was taking a lot of threes. Before that, he was taking difficult mid-range jumpers. Now he's just getting downhill, attacking the paint, looking for the mismatches at a higher and more efficient level. I don't know how anyone's going to stop that. And then for Kevin Durant, like I said, it's just KD. He's one of the greatest of all. He's like one of the greatest to play this game, one of the most lethal scorers to play this game. You don't stop KD. You try to contain him, but that is a challenge. This is the matchup that's going to me, determine who will come out as the victor. Because if Randle can get into his bag and you don't have the rim protection and so forth to stop him, I feel like it's going to be tough sledding for the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one thing to watch out for that might change is the last 2 games. Frank Vogel's promised to try different starting lineups throughout the season. Even if they find something that they like, they're going to mix and match because the bench is basically all new guys and it's a new coaching staff. So they need to kind of evaluate what they have, what they don't have. So for the last 2 games, they've actually started Chimezie Metu at the 4 and to move KD to the 3. So that might be something, especially in this particular matchup, where the Suns go to Metu again, just to have a longer, more athletic, stronger body against Randle, as opposed to someone like a KD, and play him more so on the wing. So that's one thing that I would watch out for. I don't know if he'll continue to do it. We saw last night him start the first half, and then the second half they put Nas Little in his place, but I think that was more matchup based with the Nets and their wing heavy lineups. So that's one thing I'm going to keep an eye on. But Randle was a load for the Suns last time they played, especially in that second half spurt where he went off. I'm sure they're very cognizant of that heading into their second matchup. So that's probably why I would put even more money on Metu starting, just so they have someone who can be a little bit more physical at the 4 and try to keep him out of the paint.
Interesting. You're gonna have Metu starting at the. So wait, how would that lineup look if you're gonna have Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant? So you're gonna have so you put KD at the small forward, then Metu at the 4, and you have Nurkic at the center. Interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
And I think last night, especially against the Nets, because they went small, they switched in the second half so that Metu could be coming off the bench as like their small ball 5. I don't know with the Knicks' current center depth if they would need to do that again. So it might make sense for them to start Metu at the 4 and hope that, Drew Eubanks won't be terrible in his backup minutes again like he was last night.
I think more so for me than at the center position, it's more so how do the Knicks combat that Booker, Beal, KD on the perimeter? Because if you're going to have Metu play on the 4, then I would expect Randle to be defending him, and that just creates a whole set of issues on the perimeter where you got Brunson, you now have Dante, and then you have RJ, and between all 3 of those guys, none of them I want guarding Kevin Durant. But then when you think about who's guarding Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, like I'm guessing if that case, I'm putting Brunson on Beal and I'm putting Dante on Booker just because Booker's been more in a rhythm. He's played more games this season than Beal. Beal's still a little bit rusty, and I can at least, it seems like for Beal, and I know he's a lethal 3-level scorer, but when I just think about how the Suns are set up and just like from a theoretical standpoint, I feel like because we see Eric Gordon just chilling in the corner, I feel like that's where Beal's going to be, and not saying he's going to stay there permanently. Like he can do whatever he wants with the ball in his hand. But I feel like for Brunson, I'd rather have him parked on the perimeter with Beal, especially for Beal to get back in rhythm while I'm having like Dante chase around Devin Booker and then Kevin Durant. I mean, good luck. I mean, RJ on Kevin Durant, it just seems like that's the most logical thing out of all those guys just because of a height standpoint. Like he's our tallest. Like, yes, the center is our tallest guy, but for on the perimeter, it is
Right.
RJ Barrett, which to me is just screaming nightmarish. God, this is going to be such an interesting thing. It's just going to be so interesting seeing that all play out.
Yeah, that's the challenge this team brings, and it's unfortunate we've only gotten to see it once with a Nets team that's pretty well suited in terms of the amount of wing defenders that they have. But I think with a Knicks team, given who they've been starting recently, that's where the challenge comes in. Is like Beal is going to be a problem for teams that don't have like three capable guard or perimeter defenders of that caliber. Like you said, even putting Brunson on him, he wasn't as involved last night. I think, there's still that feeling out process of like, you go, now I go, when do we go type of thing. So he was spacing kind of in the corner quite a bit. But I think with this matchup in particular, like you mentioned, because Mitchell Robinson's out and being able to get downhill and get to the rim, because they want to get Beal in a rhythm and figure that out, I think they might try to get him more involved, try to test Brunson's off-ball defense with a lot of the curls and back cuts that they'll have Beal doing. It's just an interesting challenge that they pose, because guarding Devin Booker is a tough enough task. Guarding Kevin Durant's a tough enough task. Even if you manage that, you still have to worry about Beal. It's going to be an unfair proposition for teams that don't have that in their starting lineup, that defensive capability.
It's not fair at all, Gerald. It's not fair at all. And for me to even think about that out loud and talk about this amongst Knicks Nation, it's giving me pause, man. It's giving me pause. Oh, good God. This is going to be such a challenge. I'm so interested to see how this all plays out. But moving along, we got, like I said, we got Brunson versus Beal. I mean, Beal is not the best defender. Devin Booker's a really good defender. I think sometimes he goes underrated as a defender. Kevin Durant has really improved as a defender as well, especially when it comes to guarding the paint and using his height to be a shot blocker at times. So for the way I'm looking, I think Brunson should be a positive matchup against Beal on the offensive side for him. Dante, the switch with Grimes was because Grimes wasn't fulfilling his role on both ends of the court at time. More so, he was doing a good job defensively. There were nights where he was shaky, but not being involved on offense and having to hesitate and just like not knowing which shots he should take kind of trickled down to his defense as well, where it's like losing the confidence, not knowing what to do. And so with him, that's why he's on the bench. With Dante now, there's a little bit more fluidity in the way that they just move the rock and they can attack on offense. But Dante guarding Booker just seems like I don't even know. And now offensively, I feel like for Dante, if he's not involved, that's just an easy assignment for Booker. Even though Dante will be relocating and doing all those things, the involvement for Dante should be easy for Booker. And then, like I said, if you're gonna have Kevin Durant out there, like and RJ Barrett as like the matchup, that's just I don't know what to even think about that one. It depends on what night you get from RJ for me, but those are my thoughts on the matchup, and that's why I look at Randle as like the key matchup for that night, because whoever's guarding him, I think it will be a problem. Whatever for just the entire night. But I'm going to move to the bench.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to move to the bench, and the matchup I'm looking at, even though it's the entirety of the bench and how they all perform overall, it's IQ versus Eric Gordon if he's back, because Eric Gordon's that shooter off the bench. You can replace him with Beal as that guy on the perimeter that we saw, especially in the last match between the Knicks and the Suns, as he was just cooking, absolutely cooking from the court on the court. That matchup is what's big to me, because when you look at the numbers, and I know it's still a big change, right? Because for the Suns, you now got Beal back. One of those guys is going to be running with the second unit, and I think Beal might be that guy just to get back in rhythm. But when you look at like the offensive rating, Knicks are 6th right now when it comes to bench offensive rating, and the Suns are 21st. And I think that's where the Knicks can thrive, especially defensively. You got Hart quickly out there, Isaiah Hartenstein, Quentin Grimes down there being one of your better perimeter defenders. I think defensively against the Suns bench unit, there should be some success there. What do you think of that matchup?
Yeah, I think this game will be won and lost not in, the starting lineup or, how the Knicks defend the big three when they're out there together, but it's how the Knicks are able to capitalize in those instances where the Suns are staggering their guys with bench heavy lineups, because that's where it was lost for the Suns against the Nets the other night. And especially, the second quarter stint where Bradley Beal is kind of out there as the lone star with mostly bench guys. I think that is where the Knicks have an advantage and need to kind of run up the score a little bit when they have those lineups. Because I know Quickly has been great. I've seen a good amount of Knicks fans on Twitter wanting him to play more minutes. So I think that's,
And
having
rightfully so, man. He's
right.
always a positive on the court.
Mm-hmm.
When he's out there, like whether it's defensively, offensively, like he just brings
Mm-hmm.
an energy, and he's coming back off a knee soreness right now, but he always brings an energy that helps that Knicks bench and the team in general.
Yeah, I mean it's between Quickly and Grimes. That's going to be tough for the Suns bench guys to contend with if they don't have Grayson, if they don't have Gordon, who, like you mentioned, had one of his best games of the season so far against New York the last time they played. So I do think when Booker is out, that is when the Knicks need to strike with, the bench scoring that they have with Quickly in particular. He's a guy that's given the Suns problems in the past for sure. And that's something that I don't even know who's going to be available, because Gordon was actually kind of his addition to the injury report for the last game was he was a late scratch with leg
Hmm.
soreness. So we don't really know what the extent of that is right now. He does have a day off to recover. But if he's out and if Grayson's still out with the groin strain, like the Knicks have a definitive bench advantage, and that's where they need to really make their mark on this game.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And you know, with Grimes being added to the second unit, he didn't have a good game last night against the Jazz, but against the Celtics, he got back into rhythm. He had a really great outing against Toronto. I hope if you get some solid play from him and Quickly offensively, especially shooting the threes, I think that will help keep the Knicks in this game. And look, I'm going to go straight to the X factor because it is Quentin Grimes for me. And I know some Knicks fans are going to go out there and be like, well, shouldn't it be RJ Barrett because this guy's inconsistent and he had a strong start to the season, but ever since he's come back from his migraine injury, what about him? Like he's in that starting rotation. He should, like, you don't know what you're going to get on a nightly basis for him. And I would agree with that. I think like as an X factor, you could always choose RJ Barrett because he's part of that big three, been very inconsistent over his career, had a poor outing against Utah last night. I mean, to start off the game 0 for 9 is just rough. And he only made 3 of his, I think, what was 16 to 19 shots. It's not a good look. Yeah, it was tough. It was a tough night, Gerald. It was a tough night against Utah. I'm still aggravated about it. I don't really want to talk about it, but I have to because that's how you get ready for these games. Anywho, I'm looking at Grimes because that the bench unit is where the success is going to come from. I just don't see like if it's going to be KD playing the three, I just don't know how much success I can expect from RJ. So if I'm going to need a tilt in the Knicks' favor, it's got to be Grimes for me, especially because he's had a rough start to the season. He's played better, and I think if you get his shooting, especially on the bench unit, it can really catapult this team and help them stay in this game. And I'm choosing Grimes because I feel like, yeah, like like I said, I can always choose RJ, but it's just look, we've seen this team do well without RJ too. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, so like I'm gonna go in a different direction and choose Quentin Grimes. Who would your X factor be for the Phoenix Suns?
That's a tough one. I am probably going to go with. I'd have to say Nasir Little again, just because I don't know what the state of the Suns bench is going to be. He played really well last night. I think he had 10 points and like 6 or 7 rebounds off the bench. It was his first game back after dealing with concussion protocol, and he had an orbital fracture. So he's donning the mask these days, and masked Nas was pretty good in his first outing. So I'm interested to see if he's able to have that same type of impact off the bench. Another guy I'd keep an eye on is Jordan Goodwin. He's been pretty good for the Suns for the most part. He had a real stinker of a game against Brooklyn the other night. So it might be a situation where he tries to bounce back, especially as a guy who might play more minutes just because the Suns might need somebody to put on Jalen Brunson, one of those, ball hounds who's going to irritate a ball handler. Those are probably my two guys, unless Grayson plays, just because I honestly have no idea what their bench is going to look like on a day-to-day basis at this point.
I feel like, well, that's just the Suns in general, right? You never know what this team's going to look like, but yet somehow you got 13 wins. You're still competing in a tough Western Conference. Gerald, I appreciate you coming on the show and taking the time to talk to me and preview this game. One last question. How do you think this game will go? Do you think it'll be a tight contest? Do you think the Suns are going to run away with it now they got their big three back? What do you expect for tomorrow's game?
I think the Suns are going to do really well in the minutes where the big three are on the floor. I think the Knicks are going to make it a closer game in the stints where it's just Beal out there or it's just KD out there, kind of like we've seen. I think they're still figuring out how they want to stagger guys, how they want to put those rotations alongside their stars when they're resting one or two of them. And if they don't have their full complement of guys, I think that definitely opens the door for the same type of thing that we saw last night, where as soon as you start staggering, the opponent is able to go on a run. I think it'll be another close game. I think the Suns are going to win. They've been 6-7 at home. I don't think that's going to continue for much longer now that they have the big three healthy. And I think losing Mitchell Robinson for this matchup in particular is going to be tough to keep the big three from attacking the driving lanes they have now. But, the Suns have lost 5 of their last 7 games. They're not fully healthy. So I think it's going to be a tough game that could go either way, to be honest with you.
I think it's going to be a tough game. I think it will be a close contest. Knicks coming off a bad loss to the Utah Jazz. I think there's going to be a little bit of fire under them to get back on track. I know Brunson had one of his worst games under his Knick tenure. It was rough. I know RJ, like I said, it's a mixed bag. You don't know what he's going to do after a bad game. It's either he's going to be on a streak of a bad series of bad games, or he just bounces right back and he gets back into a groove. The only one I could say that's consistent right now is Julius Randle, and he's the only guy I expect to show up for tomorrow night, and could say confidently the run that he's been on, it's all NBA caliber Julius that we've seen in the past couple of seasons. But I think it will be a tight contest, as you noted. It's going to be the bench that gets back into us, and I think if you don't have Eric Gordon, if you don't have Grayson Allen, it's just giving Quickly, who shot really well last night, an opportunity to score. It's giving Josh Hart freeway to just attack the lanes, and he's been playing much better too. And if Quentin Grimes gets back into rhythm, like we saw the first 2 games coming off the bench, it should be a good contest for the Knicks to stay in this. And if they can keep up that way, and you have Brunson who can just be that close that we need him to be, the Knicks could have this game. But it's definitely going to be an uphill challenge. I expect the Suns to bring out their A game after losing to the Brooklyn Nets with their big three back. So we'll see how it goes. I do think it will be a tight contest. But Gerald, I appreciate you coming on the show. Please let our listeners know where they could find you if you got any upcoming work that we should check out.
Yeah, I've been writing like crazy this week. There's a lot going on in Suns world. So if you are interested in that perspective, all my work is at gophnx.com. And then obviously we do our Suns podcast 5 days a week. That's the PHNX Suns pod. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Gerald Bourguet. I go to all the home games, so I'll be doing some reporting from Suns at Knicks on Friday.
Awesome, Gerald. Thank you once again for coming through. And to Knicks Nation, thank you all for tuning in again for another Game of the Week preview. Once again, you can catch the New York Knicks facing the Phoenix Suns tomorrow at 10 p.m. So make sure to take a nap and get ready for that game if you're on Eastern time. All right, not everyone can be as lucky as Gerald being on the West Coast and having to wake up and be like, you know what? This is just a regular day for me. It's going to be 7 p.m. over here. I don't got to take a nap. I'm all good to go. But thank you all again for tuning in. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to a $100 match. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to share the links to all these videos. And look, if you can't catch it live, you can always follow us on any audio listening platform, Apple, Spotify, wherever it may be. You can find the podcast. So that way, if you're on the go, you don't have to miss anything. Also, support our writers. Go to KnicksFanTV.com. We got articles dropping frequently. We got a lot of talented writers over there. We just have a recent article talking about trades. We all know Knicks love to talk about trades. Knicks fans, trade season. You got December 15th tomorrow. Guys can be traded. So if you want to gear up, make sure to check out Jalen's recent article. He polled a lot of the KFTV writers to figure out, who could be on the market. Who should guys, be interested in from a Knicks perspective. So make sure to go check that out. All right, everyone. Salute to Knicks Nation. Salute to all the franchise channel members for tuning in. And salute to all the mods. We'll catch you later for post-game tomorrow when the Knicks play the Suns. We out.